Good morning to all the professionals who have logged in, and good morning to the panelists, Engineer Krishna Saikari and Engineer LK Jain Saab, for having logged in for the 58th webinar, the National Webinar on Analysis and Design of Liquid Retaining Structures. Today is the session 2. So let me invite Engineer Krishna A. Saikari, Chairman, ACCI Goa Center, to welcome the gathering as well as talk briefly about ACCI Goa Center as well. Welcome, sir. Over to you.
Yeah, I welcome all the participants in this webinar. And as far as this webinar was concerned, we had planned it as a 2-day seminar. And because of COVID pandemic, we had to convert it into webinar series. Goa Center, as you know, is the smallest and the youngest center. We have just completed 5 years. And in these 5 years, we have had almost 20 seminars, and most of them were ECI accredited with speakers from IITs, NITs, and consulting engineers across India. So I will share you the mail ID of ACCI Goa Center at the end of this session, and you can give us your mail ID so we can inform you about future events as and when it comes. So thank you. I thank Remco Cement because this has been a great support from them. Otherwise, this would not have been possible. I thank Mr. Anil Pillai and Mr. Suraj Kumar for all the support they have given to us. Thank you, sir. Back to you.
Engineer Saikari sir, thank you. And in fact, before I give the speaker, today is the session 2 of the seminar. A brief about the concerned organizations who are there. Association of Consulting Civil Engineers India, with its headquarters in Bangalore, is a premier professional body of consulting civil engineers with over 22 centers spread across the country. It has more than 5,000 members on its roll. It was formed and registered in 1985. Initially, it was named as the Association of Consulting Structural Engineers, which was later renamed as Association of Consulting Civil Engineers in 1987. So ACCI has been honoring individuals and organizations for achieving excellence in various domains of civil engineering for over the years. And the Ramco Cements Limited, as you know, is the flagship company of the Ramco Group, which was started in the year 1961. We presently have 12 brands of cement, which are of various types: ordinary Portland cement, PP, Portland Pozzolana cement, Portland slag cement, sulfate resistant cement, and rapid hardening Portland cement. These brands of cement have been customized based on the various concrete requirement, because as all of us know, based on the concrete requirements, the type of cement, the type of aggregates, the type of sand can be customized, and that is how it is, especially for special type of concrete. The cement is manufactured in 8 state-of-the-art production facilities that includes integrated cement plant and grinding units. And we are expected to touch 20 million tons per annum with our expansion in Kurnool, as well as in Kolaghat unit in West Bengal, and our new grinding unit in Odisha. And we also produce dry mortar product, and we have a dry mix plant in Chennai, and we have one ready mix concrete unit, and we operate one of the largest wind farms in the country. So that's about both the organizations who are involved in this 5-day seminar, because this national webinar series on analysis and design of liquid retaining structures is from June 22nd to 26th. Yesterday was the session 1, which was by Shri LK Jain, and today he would be taking over the second session. And just a few words on Engineer LK Jain. He is the consulting structural engineer. Those of you who have logged in today for the first time, he graduated in civil engineering from Visvesvaraya Regional College of Engineering, Nagpur in 1966, with merit position in Nagpur University. He is a structural designer in the field of turnkey designs for water contact structures. He has designed over 1,300 water contact structures. That itself shows that he has got a lot of exposure in this area. And he has designed 5 aqueducts in Maharashtra having framed piers which are rigidly connected to the box of the aqueduct with balanced cantilever construction. These are the first such type of structures done in India. He designed other aqueducts and canal converts for irrigation and hydropower projects. For 2 years, he was a consultant to Gujarat government for structures for Narmada Main Canal, Sardar Sarovar project, and he has been an expert advisor in Environmental Engineering Department of Maharashtra government, Public Health Engineering Department of MP government, and other organizations for district structures. He has investigated water tanks for durability problems and gave reports, worked for repair and renovation of other structures. He is also the third-party auditor for certification of ready-mix concrete plants, appointed by RMCMA. He is the member of ICI ICMQ Committee for Quality Certification Scheme. He has design experience since 1966. He has designed various types of buildings in RCC and steel, such as university buildings, residential hospitals, industrial, multi-storied, and he is the consultant for the rupees 300 crore concrete overlay proposed project for City Road of Nagpur Municipal Corporation. So that's the speaker for today, Jain Saab, who has taken the session 1 yesterday, and he talked about durability as well as construction joints, and there are a number of queries on that which he was able to he clarified. And I am sure session 2 of today, which he would be covering, would be having a lot of takeaways. And let's listen to the speaker, Engineer Jain Saab. Over to you, sir, for your presentation for the session 2. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Can everybody see my slide?
I think it will take some time to come over the screen, sir. You press that share screen, no?
Share screen. You have already third button, sir. Share screen, share content. It's taking a little while, I suppose, because of low bandwidth at Jain sir's place.
Okay.
Sir, could you use the third button, which is the share?
Yes, it is coming. Yeah, it is coming. It is coming.
And share screen.
Yeah, we are able to see on the screen slightly. It is. I think it is starting to share content. Yes, we have got it. We are able to see, sir.
Friends, yesterday, this IS 3370 is in 4 parts. Part 1, Part 2. Part 1 is general features. Part 2 is reinforced concrete design. Part 3 is pre-stress concrete design. And Part 4 is the design table. Out of that, we have revised all 4 parts in 2020. But out of that, we'll be able to speak only on Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1, I spoke almost yesterday. There are so many overlapping things in Part 1 and Part 2. Now, today we'll switch over to Part 2. I'll go to slide number 29. Yes, today we'll be speaking about Part 2. I think the slide will do this now. You'll see the slide. Part 2 is about reinforced concrete design, and since 2009 revision, we have introduced limit state design in this water retaining structures. The working state design is now out. It is deleted from the form. The standard doesn't deal with working state design. The important area of this is loads, where major changes have taken place. In earlier part, liquid load was not defined. People used to take it either as dead load or live load, and there was a lot of confusion. Now, liquid load is designed. Liquid means water load. Water or liquid. Right? So this is now been defined, and we have to separately account it in the load combination that is given. Roughly, I'll tell you that in serviceability limit state, the liquid load in a tank we take up to the working top level, that is normally we call FSL, full supply level of the tank. And it is customary in India to design these tanks for a level little above FSL. Sometimes we call it freeboard full condition. There is a small freeboard. Sometimes some people specify a very large freeboard also. People are specifying freeboard from 150 mm to about 500 mm. Usually 150 to 300 is good enough, and something we have to account above FSL for overflow to occur. When the tank is overflowing for some reason, then liquid level goes little above FSL. That is a very little above, normally about 50 mm to 25 mm above FSL only. But traditionally in design, we take 150 to 200, 300 mm above the FSL. So that is what we take maximum top liquid level for design for ultimate limit state. Because this may happen sometimes only, not always. Now, earth pressure is also defined separately. Earth pressure is also to be treated in a. We can't treat earth pressure like a dead load or live load. In codes, we call it imposed load. Live load, we don't call it. As for physics as a technology, calling it imposed load. Wind load is called here WL, and EL is called as earthquake loads. So earthquake design we have to sort out. And important is the load combination. As we have defined all these loads, the load combination table is given, and we define the we take the combination separately for the defined load. Now, one more change has occurred before I go to the load combination. Mostly in Indian practice, the clear radius of the wall in case of circular tank was taken into calculation for calculating the hook force in the wall. That is, pressure at a point into the clear radius of wall was taken as a hook force. Now, with this modification in this present code, instead of clear radius, which is the radius of the center line of wall, that is half the thickness of the wall we add. Theoretically speaking, if we take the pressure gradient, assumed pressure gradient across the thickness to be linear, then approximately the radius should be of the center line. Approximately means leaving a small correction. If we do away with a small correction, approximately this will be all right. But if the thickness is much higher, really speaking, it won't be center line thickness, but little less than that. Not the half the thickness in addition, that is center line, but little less. So, leaving that very small correction further, what we have specified in the code, that hook tension is defined for radius of the wall, center line radius of the wall. Now, this is the load combination table. Now, here you will find that we have clearly added the fluid load. FL is our liquid load or fluid load. So, FL is, I can't write liquid load L because people confuse with live load. So, we have to call it fluid load, FL. So, FL is there and earth pressure is there, imposed load is there, and we have these load combination. Here you find that in serviceability limit state, earlier we had only one combination, that all loads with load factor 1 we used to take it. Serviceability limit state, we are taking deflections and cracks. Now, in this code, what we have added is, in serviceability limit also, a small portion of the wind load or earthquake load has to be taken. That small portion here, it is given 0.3. This is to be taken as serviceability in this state, of course, then the earth pressure will not be there. And imposed load, like live load also will not be there. Earth pressure will be very nominal, not be there. Here, in this revision, we have not introduced temperature shrinkage stresses. Stresses due to temperature shrinkage. Normally, it was assumed that temperature shrinkage still we can work out separately, but need not combine with dead load and water load or fluid load case. Now, still in this particular division, we have not gone far. There is just a suggestion that load and fluid load plus 0.2 times the temperature shrinkage we can account. Today, it is not part of the code. Next division, it can come. Temperature shrinkage, when it becomes important, one should know it. In large tanks and where the temperature variations are large per day, that is in daytime, the interior of the wall or the roof is cooler because of the water being inside, exterior because of sunshine may be higher temperature. So that makes if this temperature gradient across the thickness is high, it has to be accounted. So the present code does not deal with it in details, just indicating that in future or in important or large works, you may have to account this also. For routine work, smaller tanks, maybe up to 500 or 1000 liter tanks, where the temperature variation is also not much, we may not see this combination. Now, crackwork is important, and as already it was in the existing code, that is 2009 version, the visibility limit state. Under this, we take the crackwork and limitation is 0.2 mm. But this code deals with in more details. When it can be less than 0.2 mm and so on. Due to early temperature shrinkage stresses and no other load combination, this is one in which we take 2 mm, 0.2 mm crackwork. This is as it was in the code. It has said that though it is not part of the code, sometimes we may have to check temperature shrinkage along with other load combinations, and it is a large one or important, more important. Concrete, the temperature shrinkage and wind and seismic is not superimposed together. Dead load and water load is not superimposed with wind or seismic. This is there. It was there earlier. I was showing you in one combination, not the full design wind or seismic, but 30% of that load only in combined, not the full. But shrinkage temperature still we are not adding. It may come in future revision of the code. The temperature shrinkage is never combined with wind and seismic. In the limit state, we are not combining any of the temperature shrinkage combination, and in future also will not be doing that. Wherever aesthetics is more important and the exposure condition is more aggressive, the limit state time, the serviceability limit state will require the crackwork limitation to be lower than 0.2. Most of the time it is 0.1 mm, sometimes 0.15 mm also. Well, if you are accounting the wind or earthquake force or temperature shrinkage along with this fluid load, the limit of 0.2 mm can be exceeded and go up to 0.3 mm. Next, there are some changes in the code which were not available earlier. Many of the designers know it that the shear strength of the concrete is affected when the member in bending is also subjected to direct force. As force physics already gives the equation or correction wherein if the beam is under compression, the shear strength is improved with some factor. Now, similar to that, when beam or a member is in tension, the shear strength of the member reduces. But there was no mention of this factor in IS4 physics as well as in IS category 7. But it so happens that many of our members in water tank design are in tension. So we are always dealing with direct tension. So direct tension is most of the time there, and that reduces the shear strength. So equation is given here to reduce it. This equation is introduced first time. The constant here is H. In last many years, this constant was being debated. The values were cut off between 5 onwards. Today we have taken a value 8. If you see the Australian code or New Zealand code, they have taken a value 12 here. So maybe in future, because cracking is more important in water retaining structures, this constant in future will revise little upward. But now it is introduced that shear strength of the concrete goes down when it is direct tension. So whenever there is direct tension, in most cases it is there. The whatever small reduction, in most useful case, in slabs and panel walls, etc. Something like 10 to 20%, 30% reduction in shear strength of water. That has to be accounted in design. Now we have construction joints in the tank, and we know that construction joint introduces weakness, but folks, we are not talking of only the weakness. The shear strength is reduced when the construction joint shear strength is reduced, so we can assume that it can be 1/3. Of course, the reduction cannot be a sacrosanct figure, but some guidelines are to be given. The shear strength reduction depends upon the time gap between the two concrete phases and the roughness of the interface. So it can't be a sacrosanct figure, but in most cases, if you have done the construction joint good, the time lag is not more than 24 hours. You can take about 1/3 is the reduction in diagonal tension strength. Sorry, in diagonal tension and half in direct shear. When it is direct shear normally we check in flat slabs only, and flat slab is still at the floor slab we are not permitted clearly in this code traditionally, but as the trade goes in USA means American ECI code also, the flat slabs are permitted, and there we can check the direct shear. If you have a construction joint, we must check direct shear also. And direct shear value is very much reduced. This also depends upon direct shear value here also. This reduction will depend upon what is the direct tension across the construction joint. Now, as per IS4 physics, for beams, we used to take the critical section for shear a distance away from face of support by equal to the value effective depth of the beam. Now this distance reduces if there is a direct tension. So instead of giving a formula at what distance you have to take, a simplification is done here, that when there is a direct tension in the member also, the critical section for shear will not be at a distance equal to D, that is effective depth, but at the face of support only. This is what we are seeing. This will be a change in design of the water retaining structure. Section checks, we can account only 70% of the fluid load, the water load, and remaining 30% of water load can be treated as short-term load. Long-term load, for long-term load, we apply a peak factor. Peak factor is about 3 times. So, because most of the time in water tank, the water load will be there, but water is not always there. And hence, it can be 50-50 in most cases, but to be on safer side, 70-30 is there will apply. The exception is when tank will always remain full. For example, say in some certain industries, we provide the storage, water storage for firefighting purpose. It is never used. Normally, that water is just reserved and is not used. The tank is always full. In such a case, the 100% load you have to take for long as a long-term load. Another new factor introduced is the class of water type. We have to decide what class of water tightness we want to design. Till now, we have been designing structures generally where a small leakage or seepage or say wetness coming out is not objected to. We don't object to a small seepage, that is what concrete can do. We call it water tightness class 1. It's very common. In this common class, the crack width limitation is 0.2. If the cross section at that particular at a particular cross section, some concrete is in compression. When it is major bending and tension, you will find the neutral axis will be within the section and some compression block is available. So when compression block is minimum 50 mm or more, in fixed sections always we will find compression block is more. If it is thin section, the small section, 150 mm wall only, it may not satisfy. So in that case, if compression block is less than 50 mm, is another recommendation, means some reduction. But in this case, 0.2 is minimum. But if there is no compression block at all, say when a cylindrical wall is in hook tension, the crack is throughout and there is no compression block, then the crack width limitation should go down. So 0.15 mm is the crack width limitation. So in earlier version of the code, we were only looking at 0.2 mm is the limit, but now even for water tightness class 1, 0.15 mm will be the limit when the crack is through, or what we can say, no compression block is in the section. When water tightness class 2 is there, when you want much better water tightness class, say for example, you have a tank and the wall beside the wall of the tank, you are using it as a room for some purpose. So then you don't want even a wet patch or anything else, or absolutely leakages you don't want. It can be only some wetness, some wetness coming, but no leakage. In that case, when compression block is small, 0.15 mm will be the crack width, and 0.1 mm will be the crack width, and no compression block. Now, this is also this recommendation as introductory recommendation is taken little liberal. But if you see the international code, these limits are a little more tight. Maybe in next revision, we'll have to go for little tighter limits. When we don't want, when we don't want the water to come out on other side, absolutely zero possibility, no wetness. We have two options only. We have to do pre-stressed concrete tanks, and that too, we have to give some small treatment to it inside, maybe epoxy treatment or something, and crack width will be zero. You cannot allow any crack width. So that is one type. There is a type of pre-stressed concrete permitted in our code now, because part 3 I'm not discussing. As 3070 part 3 is the pre-stressed concrete. There can be a pre-stressed concrete. When pre-stressing is in one direction, the a number, say maybe a wall, is pre-stressed in one direction, but in other direction, it is still working as a reinforced concrete. In that case, some slippages may come. We are not talking of that type. So in class 3, when we say pre-stress, it is in both the directions and some type of treatment inside, or is impermeable lining. Maybe you do the RCC tank, but there is impermeable lining applied to it. The pre-stress cylinder tanks, what is done in other countries nowadays, within the concrete or inside the concrete, there is a steel plate lining given. Very large tanks. This is also for the other liquids. In this code, we are not talking of other than aqueous liquid, but for other liquids like petroleum products and so on and so forth, the lining is always used. There are many tanks which are lined. So that is the class of tank which we call tightness class 3. This tightness class is introduced first time in the 4th year. Now friends, I had already told you yesterday that what we have indicated is what we have introduced in this code is one more factor, which is H/T ratio. That is hydraulic gradient of the water to the concrete. So hydraulic gradient, then it is less than 20. Now, in Indian condition, most of the tanks we were designing with H/T ratio remaining of this order, H/T about 20, 25 of that order. If you increase this H/T ratio, internationally we can go up to 35. So this code permits you up to 35, but at that level, the quality of concrete, workmanship, all that has to be excellent. Average and good will not do. If we go to 30, we have to be very good in all other qualities. If we have 25, good quality. Average, 20. So if you are average, this can do, but your limitation of crack width we can relax. Instead of 0.15, I can make it 0.2. Where little relaxation is available. When somewhere we require 0.1 mm crack width, instead of that, I can do it 0.15, but never more than 0.2 mm. So for water tightness class, to have good water tightness in class 1 and 2, we can relax the crack width limitation, because if we have somewhere we have make it more tight, so we can relax it also. That relaxation is given here. At construction joint, we know we are introducing weakness not only in strength but leakages also. At construction joint, the permeability increases, and we know it. So we know it from experience that crack widths are higher. So unless you have a method of calculating crack width at construction joint, there can be a method. And while estimating crack width, what we do is we estimate the strain in steel and concrete stiffening we work out. If there is a construction joint, concrete stiffening reduces, and that's how the crack width increases. And adopt that method of calculating it, or a simple thumb rule given as an introductory in this particular code, because it is introduced first time, that by a thumb rule we can enhance it by 0.05 mm. So if you calculate your crack width to be 0.15 mm, you assume that being a construction joint, it will be 0.2 mm. So your limit is 0.2. That means at construction joint, you design the steel such that 0.15 mm will be the crack width. Because of construction joint, add another 0.5 mm and it will become 0.2. That is how we can calculate. So between monolithic section and the construction joint, there is a difference in estimating practice that has to be done. So yesterday I told you that when you provide a construction joint, the designer will specify a construction joint at some place. He has to apply check, the shear check and crack check that will be applied. And it is not that we can give it anyway. At some critical position, at face of support, we have, say it is a slab, so near face of support, we have negative bending moment, which gives us crack width. We have shear force, which enhances the crack width slightly. Its effect is not much, but there is the effect. So what we do is how to account the effect of shear stress. Finally, shear stress means diagonal tension only. So how to account this tension? Taking the crack width. So this equation is given. A equivalent moment is to be added. At that section, there is already some bending moment. To that, you add a bending moment, which is the enhancing moment. This equivalent enhancing moment is shear force at that section into the thickness of the member by 3. This, of course, nomenclature is proper. The member thickness is here. Member thickness by 3. 1/3 of the thickness of member. So shear force into 1/3 of the thickness of member is the hypothetical bending moment, which we add to the normal bending moment. So our now total bending moment is more, and accordingly we have to check the crack width. So when shear is high, the crack width. You'll find that this way our crack width is increased by about 10 to 20%. It's not a big difference, but it's an increase. Next, now we'll look into what happens with temperature shrinkage. I've already indicated that temperature shrinkage stresses are there, and in important structures or large structures, or where temperature movements are high, or the shrinkage is very high. If you are using more of, suppose we are doing a tank with self-compacting concrete, we will not be able to design a self-compacting concrete with less than, say, 500 kg of cementitious material, 500, 550 kg of cementitious material. So shrinkage is a little more, unless you add shrinkage compensating the additives. So if shrinkage is high or temperature is high, you have to account for temperature shrinkage also, but still this particular revision we are not given much of the details. I hope Dr. Ingle will be talking to you tomorrow about the tank design. This you may refer to temperature shrinkage also. So in small tanks, most of the cylindrical wall, the vertical reinforcement is common only, and there it doesn't make much of a difference. But the tank where rectangular tank, a large tank, large means maybe 4-5 meter panel, and you have a sunshine on the external surface of the wall. This adds to a little stress and makes a difference in crack width calculation, and maybe provision of steel also. But all said and done, those effects are small, again of the order of 10-20%. But one should account. So in future, this requirement will come. And in important tanks, as I said, though it is not given now, the designer's judgment and to take it on. Now, for design of temperature shrinkage, our philosophy which we adopted from British Code is that we don't allow concrete to dry out. If concrete doesn't dry out in the initial range, that is when we construct the tank, our curing is over, and after that concrete tries to dry out till we fill the tank. So there is a chance that concrete will dry. If it dries out, there is a drying shrinkage, and this shrinkage is much more. In case tank is not, the concrete is not allowed to dry out, the chemical shrinkage is roughly 33% to maximum 40% of the total shrinkage. So what we are designing in this particular standard is that concrete, which is chemical shrinkage, and not drying shrinkage. In any case, you see that you are allowing, in some cases, the tank is filled sometime and maybe remain empty for longer time. Once you fill the tank, full drying shrinkage to occur in a closed tank, it takes almost a month, depending upon temperature. So 15-20 days to a month for concrete to dry out. If it is open top tank, it may take from 7 days to something like 15-20 days to dry out. So if tank we are filling daily, this condition will not occur. Any tank which we are filling and emptying daily, total drying out never takes place. But otherwise, in some other application, if drying out is there, we have to consider that drying shrinkage also, which is not. Our minimum reinforcement requirement, which is recommended in the code, is not accounting this drying shrinkage. So we have to take care of. So it happens, I'll tell you, you construct a water tank and maybe you have tested it also by filling it once, and for some other reason, you keep it empty for a few months, maybe a year, and when you again fill, you'll find that a lot of leakage is coming out because tank has dried and a lot of drying shrinkage cracks have formed. And after 1 year, this healing of those, autogenous healing of those drying shrinkage cracks will be very, very slow and it becomes difficult. So if tank, there is going to be a condition of drying out, where minimum reinforcement has to be higher and you have to design that. This is the example of a tank I've shown you. In this particular code, as it was in the earlier code, we have retained clauses on floor, wall, roof, separately discussed. So those clauses are similar to what we have seen. And we have given some minimum reinforcement. I was referring to yesterday that temperature shrinkage is seen, or we call it minimum reinforcement. We can go in 3 different ways we can see this. One is a simple minimum where percentage of steel is specified in the code, that value is given in the code, you can adopt. Second is you can design like the row critical, that is when dealing with part 2, I have shown you what is row critical, a critical steel ratio, and depending upon the length of the tank or the distance between the movement joints, the steel can be higher than the critical steel calculated, and it is very, very close or very small tank, it can be lower. So it varies. So with the size of tank, it varies. Now, ground tanks gives lot of restraint. The ground itself gives you restraint against shrinkage or against shortening of the concrete. Whereas elevated tank gives little, no such shortening, except for steel within, which is inside, within that. The steel within gives you the restraint. So if you try to calculate it for, say, the HMFC steel 415 grade is most common, you find that the percentage of steel can go up as the length goes up. Similarly, for ground tank, it can go from 0.2% to 0.4%. But our code, so this table I have worked out, a bit modified from what is given in code, because code a simplified form is given, whereas somebody felt that we keep it higher for even elevated tanks. If somebody has influenced that, actually restraint in elevated tank is much less than the ground tank. But some person, some member felt that elevated tanks are more important and they have increased this percentage there. So minimum steel is governed by whether it is ground tank or elevated tank. What is the size of the tank? That is length and width, whatever the larger diameter, the larger size, not diagonal. You need not in rectangular tank, it is 20 by 30 meters, so 20 or 30 will take into account that is the direction in which we put the reinforcement and not diagonal. Say 20 meter tank, Diagonally, it will be more than 28 meters. So we don't consider 28 meters because we place the steel in two directions. Effective steel in that diagonal direction is 1.4 times more, under 2 times. Linear steel is effectively increased. So we don't see diagonal. So along the steel as we provide, we should see what the size of tank or the spacing of job, and accordingly the importance of minimum reinforcement is there. Next. Now, in all these water retaining structures, we have junctions. Wall-to-wall junction is there, wall-to-slab junction is there, wall-to-roof junction is there. Beam to beam it will join, column to beam it will join. So we have junctions. Now you can see this figure here, it shows the type of junction. It is a rectangular junction and one member meets another, right angles to each other, and a closing type of joint, type of a portal type of thing, situation. This is the opening junction. This is wall-to-wall junction. If the rectangular tank is there, one wall meets the other. Inside you have liquid pressure, the tension is inside, and this is called opening type of junction, tension inside. Now, instead of right angle, it can be any other angle, actually correct. Now, this is the toe of a wall. Now, all these junction details have come from a research which was done in Sweden. They're building research station built in 1973. After seeing that many of the retaining walls of bridges in the highway structure collapsed or failed. So they had a whole research program and they found that why it is failing. So this is a rectangular right angle junction with a toe. It is little better, but then how this can fail. T junctions when we have column and beam, or you can turn it 90 degrees. That column, the external column and a beam. This can be in buildings also. This can be in the elevated water tank also, or a roof of water tank, beam and column junction. It can be. This is the X junction where beam is continuous and wall is continuous. This can be a type of junction. So in water retaining structures also, these types of junctions are there. But so it is important in all types of structure. Maybe you are dealing with buildings or any other type of building. But in water tank, these junctions become more important for two reasons. One, cracks and leakages are important. In building, what happens if the junction is a little weak? It will crack, and ultimately it will take up the moment as its capacity, and somewhere else the other moment will exist. But here leakages are important. This is one. Second, say for elevated tank when column and beams are there, our braces are not subjected to dead load and other loads. The major load on our braces is only seismic or wind, which changes sign. That is, due to vibrations, we'll find that the tank is vibrating to a section. At a section, the top phase is under compression once, and then in the next cycle it is tension at that top phase. The tension and compression is a total reversal of stress, and it is very, very important, and there is much damage done. So in such reversals, you'll find that if there is any defect, it is usually seen, and performance of the structure is very much affected. So hence we find that we have to be cautious. Hence something about detailing is added in this. This positive moment junction, tension inside, is not very common in water tanks. We are not dealing with here. But I'm sorry. No, this is the positive moment junction. This is the opening type of junction. This is important. The closing type of junction where tension was outside is not important. So that I'm not dealing. Now tension inside is very common. Wall to wall junction. This is the major tension bar. how we anchor that bar is very important. Not only the anchorage length, what happens to this junction and how the junction will behave is all important. We will deal this in a little more detail. If it is a homogeneous section, means uncracked section, what will happen? Stresses will be produced in tension and compression, but when in tension side, see what is shown in these stresses are homogeneous. In tension side, the inside corner the stress is maximum. On compression side, at the steel fiber stress is 0 because this is the corner. And my resultant compression is more or less in the middle. What happens is my effective depth is very much increased, very much reduced. My effective depth is very much reduced. So what happens in this junction is the behavior is much different than what we have learned the behavior of beam flexural member which is straight. Straight flexural member behaves in certain way, which we have learned. What we have learned in our engineering and design practice is to deal with straight members like beam, column, slabs, and so on, or wall. But when these are curved members or when junctions, that we have not gone through. At this joint, if we take a diagonal, other diagonal, we have taken this diagonal, it is shown. If we take the other diagonal, a diagonal tension is produced. Tension will be along this direction, but tensile stress will come. It's very easy to calculate. A designer can easily calculate. I'll show you in the next slide how much this tension will come. Concrete cannot take this tension. We are not providing any stirrups there. If it is a wall or a slab, so what will happen? It will crack. If this junction has to be rigid, if it cracks, it is no more rigid. It will not behave as rigid. Here, it will not take bending out. You see that. Initiate the failure. The failure is here with the tension. If this happens in normal direct shear, the crack will pass through this and find this chuck is redrawn here. There is a tension. The force here is known. Due to bending, we calculate tension. Tensile stress, tensile steel you are calculating, you know the tension force. You know the compression force. But this compression should be equal to direct force on the number. Tension or compression, whatever. Tension, compression is whatever it is. So we know this force. We know this also. So resultant of this thing is a force in this direction. We know. Approximately we can calculate this distance also and parabolic distribution, so we know the stress. Knowing the stress, if it fails here, progressively within some milliseconds, the crack will produce and whole crack will produce. You'll find that once crack is produced of this length, this will immediately produce. So if this portion is going out, you imagine that this portion is going out cracked. Will the remaining portion be sufficient to qualify the joint? To prevent the crack to open, crack to take place, it's not allowed to open. We should provide diagonal steel, like a stirrup, diagonal tension. But it's very difficult to provide, and people had done research earlier. On this type of joint, research was done before even World War II, and it continued in 70s, and no solution was got. This was known in 50s also, 48, 45, 50. This was known that we should have a diagonal steel, but they found that effectiveness is very low, and because this is very much prone to placing errors of this steel, and this was not practical. one of the best things known before 70s was that we provide a steel in loop. We loop the steel and continue. That was the best type of detailing known at that time. But in practice, if this loop doesn't go further, it has to more or less circumvent the whole of junction portion except the cover. So if it goes, we have a efficient junction. If somehow loop becomes smaller, it's not a efficient junction. But in any case, even if it goes through, the efficiency is not more than 80%. 100% efficiency is what I mean by 100% efficiency, you are designing member for some moment. This joint you are designing, this member you are designing. We normally don't design the joint, we design members. The members we are designing, at this joint, the members are designed for some moment. Now, will this joint take that moment? If we experimentally, maybe a full section, full size experiment we do, we apply the moment for which the section is designed. Will this combination of the two members and junction together will take that moment? If it doesn't, we say that efficiency of joint is low. Now here is that plot, that efficiency of joint, ordinary type. This was the most common type of detailing done by many still. Many textbooks also show detailing like this. The tension member of one of the tension member of tension steel, one of the member is just anchored. You feel beyond the face of the member, face of the joint. The joint is something like a god, it takes care of everything. And you have to place the steel in the joint somewhere away from this member. So we have a beam away from this section. We provide the bar with enough of anchor length, something like equal to anchor length, and forget about it. But what happens to joint? If joint cannot perform, this will not perform. I'll show you more slides. So efficiencies can be as low as it comes from efficiency is something like 45% to something like 25%. If the percentage steel is low, that means the design section is not much underreinforced, is underreinforced. So if section is underreinforced, the efficiency is 40%. If it is more or less totally reinforced, that means balance section, the efficiency can go as low as 25%, 30%. So in most of the cases, we'll find that efficiency will be, in our cases, that is what we are doing, water retaining structure, efficiency will be of this order. That means something like 40-50% to 30%. Now this is the joint where this reinforcement goes and comes back on the same member. So it is totally anchored, it comes back in a loop form, and so efficiency is little higher. But if this type of loop is there, efficiency is still higher. As I said, it is crossing 80%. But if the percentage speed is high, it is not 80%, it is close to something like 70-75%. So we are not reaching 100% efficiency. And if we see, of course, I'm not showing you slides, what happens to crack widths. Crack widths doesn't increase 10-20% here and there. Crack width just double. So crack width is more important. We should do a detailing where the joint efficiency is 100%. We say actually the joint should be more reliable than the member. Why 100%? Why not? As a designer, I think more than 105, 110%. I should have little extra margin. If you are doing steel structures and you are designing joints, bolted joints or riveted joints, we'll try to provide, whether code tells us it or not, the joint has to be for higher efficiency. I provide weld, or maybe if it is welded joint, there my efficiency is 150%. I provide 50% more weld than needed as per calculation, because the workmanship and this and that is more susceptible. Junctions are more susceptible to workmanship and error. Wherever things are more susceptible to workmanship and error, we have to go beyond 100% and provide something. So that is not mentioned in the code. That's how it's like. Now they have found that instead of doing all this thing, the efficiency doesn't go up. The best thing is to take the bar and bend it back at the hairpin to same member. Now that gives the highest efficiency, but not even 100%. And looking at the crack width, then they realized that to control crack width, we have to have additional bar. Now this is what was the test program was there. This bar is anchored here, this bar is anchored here. And on other phase, which is compression side, we provide nominal anchor bar. These are nominal bars, much smaller bar. And what happens when we test this specimen in laboratory? This is the reinforcement shown. Now you can understand. It's a very common thing done still by many people and still in water tanks. Reinforcement of one wall is just anchored into the other wall. This is anchored into the other. And what is the efficiency of this joint? Now this is when we apply load, the load is resistance into this load is the moment applied here, and we find that crack is formed. This corner is detached from the junction portion. And what remains, this also a crack form, a heavy crack form. So what remains, you can imagine there is no joint. It's just a become hinge between these two lines. So our assumption that joint is rigid is absolutely gone. Not there. And this is not that in some cases it happens. In 100% of the cases this will happen. So how the crack is formed, and if you remove this portion, what you can see is like this. This is how crack is formed, and the diagonal crack is formed. With simple mechanics, you can calculate things. Simple triangle you can calculate. I'm not going into detail of calculation. You calculate what is the force required to this zone to be pulled off. You can calculate it. So it will be a crack like this. This diagonal crack is very wide. To control this crack, what we need is a fillet reinforcement. We cannot control this crack unless we provide a fillet reinforcement. And as soon as we provide fillet reinforcement, our efficiency goes above 100%. So we are crossing the limit of 100. That was very nice. I'm just repeating it what I've said, that bars, tension bars of one of the wall and bending like a hairpin and taking back in the same wall. This can be reinforcement. For other wall, I'm taking the reinforcement like that. So this is gives you the highest efficiency, and to make it 100%, we have to give a diagonal. Diagonal is fillet bar. Now, whether we give fillet or only fillet bar, that depends. If you give fillet, the efficiency is much higher, but if you give a fillet bar, it is all what you can provide. So to understand this, I've given you 2-3 figures in different colors. So I'm repeating the slide just for people clear understanding. To summarize, we started with building like this. You can see it, where efficiency was 32% for some particular type of moment capacity. Now, various type of detailing, we improved it to something like 110, 114%. So we cross 87, we cross 100 by providing fillet bar. When we provide fillet, there's no question of percentage efficiency because it will go much higher. So this fillet, what happens and how the control over cracking takes place and so on. This is the final recommendation. This figure appeared first time, though it was research done in 1973, this figure first appeared in DIN 1045. Similar to IS 456, there is German code. So in early 80s, they had introduced this as a part of their code, as part of their standard. It was introduced in the 80s. And still, after 40 years, we are discussing and we are not informed. And most of us are not informed on this result. So this has been introduced in this code now. Now this bar goes and comes back same. So half the effect is there. If I have in a small numbers, you can say a wall, a 200 mm wall, which should come out by about 100 mm. And this length here onward should be equal to a minimum, and how much it comes out is also important. If the number is thick, then you'll find anchor length is this maybe satisfied, but this will not. You have to satisfy both. And diagonal bar should be 40% of the main bar. If these two main bars are different, we may have two bars with different thickness. Of course, bending moment, design bending moment keep same, but for some reason we provide different steel in the two bar. Then average of the two, 40% of that is the diagonal tension bar. Unless we provide diagonal tension bar, we are not controlling the crack. The other method, if you are not providing diagonal tension bar, somehow you are providing these bars 5. I have calculated some amount of steel. Amount of steel calculated is 100. Instead of 100, I am providing 140. Means I have provided steel much more than needed. Then you can do a diagonal bar, and that will take the stress as well as control the crack. So either you provide more of tensile steel than calculated, or provide this diagonal bar, which is 40% of required steel. This same figure is shown here. This type of is not correct. You should understand. So I'll find that you see that I'm repeating the slides so that one can understand what the training required here to have efficiency of joint and control the cracks also. Otherwise, at these corners of the wall, this leakages will continue. Same thing happens, floor slab and wall. This may not be wall, this can be a floor slab. A floor slab of a tank, and the elevated tank is a suspended floor, but it is not supported down. It's floor slab and wall. Of course, the more or less it's similar situation is when we have ground supported tank. So on tank, of course, it will have a small toe, so increases the efficiency a bit more, but basic concept remains same. So it can be a slab and wall. You'll find that slab and wall joint at bottom leaks heavily because we have not provided structurally a big joint. That is the basic consideration. And of course, practice consideration also is okay. So wall to wall or wall to slab or slab to slab, whatever you may call it, the situation, two members are meeting at right angles, tension is inside, the joint is very flimsy. Flimsy means you have to take care. You have to provide a detailed drawing in this regard, and we have to change the practice. Otherwise, there's always problem. There are a lot of leakages from joint. If moment of resistance of this joint is less, what happens somewhere else, more moment will take place, and somehow the structure is adjusting, and we find leakages to the joint of high. So to control that, we must design the junction properly. So now I say that we are not designing only members, we have designed junctions also. We have to design junctions, and instead of doing a detailed calculation within the junction, some thumb rules are given, we adopt it, those thumb rules, and specify the junction. The junction drawings, we have to do it, junction detailing, we have to do it, and people have to follow that sacrosanct. They have to absolutely follow your details. They cannot be. As I have shown you, various you can do various variations, and efficiency is reducing. So we can't afford to do variation. Friends, this is almost end to my presentation here on part 2. Of course, there are many other things which I have not dealt, rapid calculation and so on and so forth, because they are same as what it was 2009 code. So, and if I detail document which I have given you, which you can download. If you are not downloading, they can download. Need it to get all the details are already there. If you wish to continue, I can explain you something more about practice calculation, all the values. Or the other option is there. You have question answer. And ask some questions and you can spend some time.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, thank you so much, sir, for the presentation. Session 2 on IS 3370.
This one thing, this photograph I have shown is of a tank collapse.
Okay.
July earthquake 1993.
Okay.
The tank had collapsed. I had seen only one tank collapsing, and that was because of some problem, detailing of joint and beam and column joint.
Okay.
Beam and brace, column and brace joint. So because of that, it collapsed. Yes, over to you.
Yeah. Can we take some questions, sir?
Yes, very much.
Yeah, in fact, this is the second session on the National Seminar Series on Analysis and Design of Liquid Retaining Structures. Tomorrow, again, we will be having the third session. So before going on to tomorrow's session, let us take some of the questions which has been asked by the participants. One question which has been asked is, what is the significance of corner reinforcement with lap or ingress with under wall section?
Corner reinforcement.
Yeah. What is the significance of corner reinforcement with lap or ingress with under wall section?
As I understand, I think nearly at the end, I talked about the wall-to-wall junction. So at corners, at any corner, say in buildings, when you do a staircase, from landing you go to the base slab of the staircase, you find that there is a corner form, a king form, and that is what is a corner. So a corner is formed. So a corner means junction of two numbers. So what we look at this, whenever a corner is formed, it is a junction, and we have to design this junction. I think I have given you enough detail. Now the question is, do we provide laps in that corner? Normally, we avoid laps at the corner. Because what happens is, corner is by itself a complicated thing. And the action, that is force action, the development of cracks, all complications are there. In those stress transfer complications, we are adding one more. Then bar to bar we are lapping. So bar to concrete, there is a transfer, and concrete to bar. Again there is a transfer, which means secondary micro cracks at that lap. So we are introducing more of complications. Normally it is to be avoided. So as at such junctions and corners, we should not put laps. Lap should be outside this. Has to be outside. Now in India it doesn't matter much, but in other countries, what we find is not only in water tanks but in buildings, they provide a reinforcement which is fabricated in a workshop. The whole reinforcement of a beam or a column or a wall is fabricated at workshop or at site some location, and the whole of that wall they lift and place in position. In that, what happens is that wall or a beam or a slab is definitely having connection with another man. Those connection reinforcement they put only at the position at site after locating the reinforcement at site. So wherever you will find that laps are coming just adjoining to the junction. Whenever our members are meeting, this is come from the construction practice. Now, when in India still we are assembling the reinforcement, we tying the major reinforcement in position. We are not tying somewhere else and then putting it in position. The whole reinforcement cage, we are not transporting it and putting it. Transporting doesn't mean kilometers. At site, from ground location to the location, that we are not doing. So when we are not doing that, it is not worthwhile to keep laps within the joint. In those countries also, when I said that they are putting laps, but not within the junction, but outside it. So if you look into all reinforcement detailing which is coming from Europe or maybe Cement and Concrete Association and so on and so forth, they will provide you, they will show you laps at the base of the junction or end of the member. Beam end, they always show a lap. And bar which is going inside, the beam bar doesn't go inside, a lap bar goes inside and junction is long. So that is because of a particular method of construction. So that is not necessary. So we avoid laps. Second, whenever we design for earthquake resistance, it is necessary that we provide enough of ductility. So to provide enough of ductility, the joints and region near the joints are supposed to be more important. In major cases, not in all cases, but still we are not designing for ductility. Designing means the code provides some thumb rules to give ductility. But how much ductility? We are not designing for ductility ratio of 2, 3, 4, 5. We are not calculating how much ductility ratio I require at this joint, how much reinforcement I should provide to give that ductility. So what happens? The code has given some norms, thumb rules, that to have ductility ratio of 4, you should do this way. But somewhere ductility ratio demand was not 4, it was 2 only. But that is still in design practice, we have not come up to that. Maybe in next revisions of the code, maybe after 10 years, we'll find all those things will be coming, even for normal building design. So, if we are not designing for ductility, we demand some ductility near the junction. So whenever we demand ductility near the junction, the laps are to be avoided in zones of high ductility. So near the junctions, we should avoid laps. This is our message today. I told you, if you look into the literature coming from Western world, outside world, they may provide a lap. Yes, you can provide a lap, provided you can design for ductility. If you're going by thumb rule, that will not do. If you are designing for ductility, that I want particular ductility ratio, will it give with lap? Say, example I give you. Earlier, we were not designing construction joints in this water retaining structure. We were thinking whatever we have designed, we can provide somewhere a construction joint. Now in this code, I have given you that wherever you have, this code has given you that wherever the construction joint is a weakness, you have to design for it. So lap is a weakness, and you can provide lap at junction or near junction only when you can design for it. Design that weakness. So it's not only the efficiency of lap, but what happens to cracking, what happens to other functions which has to do, because for developing tension by lapping what is the overall lap length is not enough. The secondary stresses and how it affects something else, how it affects the moment. So the moment shear relationship comes into. The moment shear relationship gets affected if you provide a lap. The laps are provided only where the either shear is small or the moment is small. Moment of shear both are high, so you should not provide lap. You can provide lap there. In say precast structure, you have to provide, but then you have to calculate it. Those calculations you will find are available in EN code, FIB model code 2010. It is the European mother code, we can call it, for all codes. FIB model code is a mother code. FIB model code 2020 is being worked out, and probably by the end of this year, or maybe at the beginning of next year, we will be having model code 2020. And simultaneously, what EN has done is, along with model code, they are revising the whole EN code. Next year, new EN code will be available. In that, the interface design is available. Interface design means maybe due to precast. There is an interface between the old concrete and new concrete, maybe due to precast, maybe due to a construction drawing, but we have to design it. And in such cases, labs also do come at that phase. So we have to design it. So those types of designs will be coming in this other codes, European codes, etc. Now, some rules are given in EN code now also, but not very detailed design. Very detailed design, people are looking into separate codes for precast work, but now it is being merged into all one code. So, Indian standard is also trying to merge all this into one code. I put physics already is in the revision. Maybe in next 2 years' time it will be available. And as soon as that is revised, we'll have to revise our IS 3370 also. In line with IS 456, many more things will come. But I'm giving you indications, and somewhere the things which we could have brought little later, it is possible today to introduce, we have introduced in this IS 3070 and then committee member of this school.
Another question is on crack width actually. What about crack width for combined tension and bending effect?
The formula which was given in 2009 code is for combined bending and tension. Now there the explanation is, in my detailed note you'll find already this explanation given. Now for crack width calculation, you call it a bending when the cross section is having tension and compression both. That is one of the phase of a cross section, maybe a wall of slab. One phase is in compression, and another phase is in tension. That means I'll say that neutral axis is within the section. Though the section is having bending plus tension, the neutral axis is within the section, we still call it bending. So the formula of bending will be applicable, because for calculating crack width, finally what we need is stress in steel. What is the stress in steel that we need? And second, the correction, based on stress in steel, you work out the strain in steel. That strain in steel, you reduce that effective strain by amount equal to tension is stiffening of concrete. Now, tension is stiffening of concrete, you calculate, and then what remains is the residual strain. Now, that residual strain gives you crack. So, strain into the crack spacing is the crack width. This is how you calculate crack width. So, with this methodology of calculating crack width, of course, there are world over 3 different basic concepts, number of many other concepts of calculating crack width, and we have adopted this from British code, which appears to be simple, but there is no worldwide consensus on that, because this crack width calculation sometimes are not safe enough. Sometimes the actual crack can actually, this is a possibility. But in practice, this is clear to understand, and it joins with mechanics, that it goes in a particular direction, that something you increase, something decrease, and so on. So there is a philosophy behind it. If you see ACI code, they give some tables and graphs and all that. And EN also gives you some tables and all that. If your stress is so much, you'll find that total steel required for a particular crack width will be much higher if you go as per EN code, and more higher if you go as per ACI code. And in future also you may have to shift to this method of calculating crack width, but till now we are calculating as per this, and the calculation is important. Now, in these type of calculation, we call it direct tension when the whole section is in tension. There is no compression in this section. That means we call it the neutral axis is outside the section. That is a normal term. So we treat whole section to be in the tension, and we apply the method already given to check the crack width for tension member. So when pure tension member, we can check the crack width. That remains same till we are adopting the display. When we will adopt some other methods, then this justification of bending or tension will also go. Tension is there in steel is because of any reason, and what is the spacing of bar and what is the tension, and then we follow certain rules. So it depends upon what type of method. So in present method, bending and tension cases are there, and you have to divide. Thank you.
So can we provide couplers at any location?
Yes, couplers, there is no problem. If the couplers, every type of coupler has an efficiency, and if you check that with that efficiency, the coupler doesn't break or it doesn't reaches near to that, yielding near to yielding or so on, there's no problem. No other checks are required. A coupler is more efficient. You see, in spite of compared to the lap joint, in lap, there is a stress transfer and secondary string. In couplers, a bar is from one bar to another, the tension is transferred by coupler. So nothing goes to concrete. So as far as concrete is concerned, coupler is a much better arrangement, except that it requires some little more space. If you are using a 16 mm diameter bar, the coupler outside will appear to be little more. So clear spacings should be available, clear distance between, so that you don't have honeycomb, probability of honeycomb. If you are using couplers, absolutely there is no problem, no other checks are required.
Few designers still use 8 mm Torr steel. Is it allowed? Because as per MJP, minimum dia is 10 mm.
No, not at all. This is a concept which people have invented their own. Somewhere some officer may have said sometime, some people are against small bars. The code doesn't specify any diameter of bar, preferably. Neither the code nor MJP. MJP means it is in Maharashtra, even Sadiq. The Water Supply Sewerage Board in Maharashtra is called MJP. So, where it is specified. The code, right from 1967 code, it used to say in that code also that you should use the smallest diameter of bar so that your bond is much better and the crack width is reduced. So as the method is provide more number of bars so that your total surface area of the bar is more, gives better bond, and crack width is reduced. As you increase the diameter of bar, maybe the spacing is increased and crack width is more. So crack width increases the diameter of bar. So our option is to reduce the diameter of bar. Yes. Then we have detailing for earthquake. And I'm referring to members, column and beam. A column we normally say we should not provide, normally means it is a requirement in earthquake physics. Minimum diameter of bar is 12 mm if we have designed as a column. In a building, something which you can call it a column, but really not column, it is a pilaster. In buildings, many times we provide something which is like a pilaster. You can provide less than 12 mm diameter bar. So when you call it a column is defined already that it should have a particular stress, compressive stress level. Then you define as a column. So column bar has to be a minimum diameter. But when we design beams for ductile detailing, the diameter of bar is important. So in an elevated tank I'm not considering here because it is not a water retaining structure, water retaining member. It is outside the tank, but since somebody has referred now a question, the elevated tank for a brace, I cannot provide bars at 8 mm, 10 mm. there has to be a limit. The main bars have to be higher. The code tells us, if you say 13920, that is ductile detailing code, the spacing of stirrups in the beam should be something like 8 times the diameter of bar. In the column, we say 16 times the diameter of bar. In beams, otherwise, we say 24 times the diameter of the bar. If I have got a 10 mm bar, 24 times with 240, I can provide a ring 240 cm. This is the normal beam as per physics in building. But if I am doing a ductile detailing, say for building also, in that zone of plastic deformation, where the plastic deformation may take place, in that zone where ductility is required, my spacing of stirrup has to be 8 times the bar. If I provide 10 mm bar, my spacing of the stirrup will be 80 mm. That's the limit. To function it as a plastic zone to give me ductility. Now, if I provide 8 mm bar, I cannot provide the stirrup at 64 mm center to center. It's too close. It will be a congestion. So practically, we cannot provide less than 10 mm diameter bar. But wherever it is possible in such beams, you provide higher diameter bar so that the spacing is more than that. 12 mm onwards, 10 centimeter is enough. So for ductile detailing, wherever it comes, we have to provide limit on diameter of bar, not otherwise. Water retaining structure, walls and slabs, if you can provide 8 mm bar. If I provide 8 mm bar and my spacing is coming something like less than 100 center, means 10 centimeter center, you can think of providing a higher diameter bar. Because in working, higher diameter is little easier to place, it will not bend, it will not after tying that reinforcement cage, it will not bend easily. So we prefer higher diameter bar in working, and the total cost of working also wise. But for crack control wise, we prefer low diameter bar. So we should reduce the diameter of bar till we find that it doesn't go to a level where congested, we can call it congested. And the steel should not be congested, that is all. We can reduce the diameter of bar as much as possible. Thank you very much.
Generally, wall is considered to have fixity at the junction. Will U-pin bar arrangement will provide fixity from other wall?
Yes, wall to wall, if I have already shown you a junction, that junction is seen. So U-pin bar we have already used. If, as I said, that in Europe somebody is doing it, he doesn't main bar of the wall, he will not take it and U-turn otherwise. What they do in other countries, one cage they will bring for one wall, another cage will for another wall, and they will insert U-pins. That is what we do in our country. The U-pin is already acceptable. I think this is already I found. So wall-to-wall junction, U-pins are required. So in my drawings, I write it. Bar is having U at the end. Bar is having hairpin at the end. Hairpin bend at the end. U end or hairpin end. That is right in the cross section also. How is the end of the bar? One should know it. If you are not providing details, some typical details we should provide, and every elevation or wherever you provide section, you should tell people that where the end of the bar will go. End of the bar should be known to one who is reading the drawing. Yes.
One question is regarding the partition wall in circular tank. If we have a partition wall in circular tank, shall the partition wall be anchored to wall? Because if partition wall is anchored, can we use IS 3370 table? How will it work with one compartment full and one empty?
I assume that your question is regarding a ground tank. In ground tank, we have two compartments. Sometimes people ask for two compartments. The usual is it is always easier to construct two tanks rather than a tank with two compartments. Easier and economic. But anyhow, if because of the situation, the site situation, if the area available is not much more available, depending upon the plot size, we have to provide a tank, so much a plot, and then as a common wall. So in rectangular tank, we do many times this happens that we have two tanks where one wall is a common wall. So there are two compartments. So when one of the compartment empty and another full, and vice versa, you'll find that particular wall, which is partition wall, will have similar steel on both sides. That happens. Now, question of circular tank, when we have a large circular tank, and inside that concentric, we make another circular wall. That the wall in between, the smaller diameter wall, will be subjected to hook force due to either water inside or outside. When hook is from outside, the whole wall will be in compression, major hook force will be in compression, steel is not required, and hook compression, wall will always be able to take, there is no problem. Amount will be more or less same, the hook compression or hook tension, because the radius of the wall is same. So the pressure at a point into the radius will be the hook force. So when you design for hook force, the wall is already safe for hook compression. Only at base of wall, the bending moment which is produced will be on water side. The bending moment causing tension will be on water side. So you will have to give same steel on the other side. If you are having a fillet, you should provide fillets like that. The shape is on both sides, or maybe fillet may be on one face for simplicity to construct, but you have to provide steel accordingly on other side. So because it is to be fixed at bottom. The normal norms, what we were adopting earlier is wall, in case of ground wall, ground pressure, ground tank, we were assuming that wall was fixed at bottom, and for that condition, the design tables are already given in part 4 for hook and bending and so on. We can design the whole wall. But some people feel, and some situations also are there, when full fixity is not mobilized. When tanks are constructed on, not on hard ground, maybe moram or maybe soft rock or something like that. When it is hard ground, more or less you get fixed wall condition. But if it is on softer ground, though we are within bearing capacity, we investigate the site and then we fix up the bearing capacity and do everything. But at the end of wall, full fixity is not optional. So what we do is, now here the question is, strictly speaking, the soil structure interaction. That is, when bending moment will come, the base of that wall will actually rotate a bit. The base will rotate. Due to bending moment, the base will rotate. To that extent, bending moment will get relieved. If any bending moment is relieved at bottom, somewhere else the stresses will change. At a distance away from, that means for that wall, the end section bending moment is reducing, the positive bending moment in middle portion will increase. So the trend is that in middle portion you design for little extra bending moment. How much extra? Is you can estimate the bending moment for a fixed end condition and hinge condition. Because we are not doing a detailed analysis. So at bottom you design as a fixed end, and rest of the wall you design as a condition in between fixed and hinge. Tables are available, bending moment, force, tension, everything you can calculate, shear, etc. everything. And that will be for condition between the two and hinge. So for two conditions, you know the force or moment, the force action, and you take the average of it. For that you can do it. That is how a simplification is done. I think that answers the question.
Thank you so much, sir, because you took so much patience to answer all the questions. It was a very wonderful session. We have the third session tomorrow again, as I was just indicating. tomorrow we will again log in at 11 o'clock. And the speaker tomorrow is Dr. R.K. Ingle, who would be talking about analysis of containers, loads, and forces. So Dr. R.K. Ingle would be joining us tomorrow. Before signing off, let me thank the speaker, Engineer Jain Saab, for having spared his time on 2 consecutive days to give us overview, as well as he has gone into details on IS 3370 with the various changes that has happened in 2020. And I think this was very useful for all the professionals, because there are a number of queries that has come. That means there would be a lot of takeaways, and at least it has generated a lot of thoughts in the minds of construction professionals. So that's a very good initiative from ACCI Goa.
I request that the participant can send me their comments also. So what we should incorporate more in the guide which I have given you, or maybe those who have a lot of experience, they can tell me where things may come more in the code. Being the chairman of that committee, can pick up that issue, and definitely in next 4 or 5 years we are going to revise it. As soon as I have revising this code, please give me feedback on that. Thank you.
Yeah, as Jain Sir was telling, please send your suggestions. When you sign out, you will get an email ID. In that itself, you can send it to us so that we can forward it to Jain Sir regarding any suggestions that you want to incorporate, or any challenges that you are facing at site, or any of our ideas can be shared with him so that he can incorporate in the future this thing as well. So with those few words, let me thank Jain Sir on behalf of the organizers. And Krishna Sakari Sir, would you like to add something from ACCI Goa Center? Yeah.
I would like to thank Engineer L.K. Jain for session 1 and session 2. It was very informative and well received by most of the attendees. And thank you too for conducting the session. Thank you.
Thank you, sirs, for having spared your time. So we will sign out from today's session. And again, we are reiterating, the participants can send their suggestions or any ideas that you feel should be incorporated in the code. Please feel free to share your ideas. So with those few words, let me take leave of all of you. Thank you so much. Stay safe. And tomorrow we will log in again at 11 a.m. For the next session. Thank you so much.